G'day. In this video, we'll preview the Scourge of Ghyran rules for the Ogor Mawtribes. Scourge of Ghyran is offering each faction a set of seasonal rules that are match play legal for the upcoming General's Handbook Season 25-26. The Great Maw has provided the Ogor Mawtribes with 2 new battle formations, a new type of enhancement known as the Big Names, as well as 2 alternative war scrolls, one for the Ironblaster, the other for the Scraplauncher. Now, these units will have a separate pitch battle profile that can be substituted for the original war scroll. You can't include both variants of the same war scroll in an army list. You can use an alternative war scroll in an army of renown, just not in a regiment of renown. So without further ado, let's go feast on our new rules. Ogres gain 2 new battle formations to go alongside the existing 4 options like the Prophet of the Gulping God and the Heralds of the Everwinter. Moorpath Menaces is a once per turn ability that is used in the enemy charge phase. You get to pick 1 friendly Ogre's infantry unit that is not in combat to be the target, then roll a dice. On a 3+, the target can then move a number of inches equal to the roll. It can move through combat ranges of enemy units, and it can end that move in combat. If it does so, the target unit has charged. It's only going to work on your Ogre infantry units, which is a large proportion of your army, as long as you're not running Beast Claw Raiders, with the exception as well as obviously your Noblars and your Yetis, and the unit to benefit has to not already be in combat. Now, since this is resolved after all enemy charges are done, it's going to rely on you positioning your units nearby the unit that you want to get into and to be able to then be out of their combat range, but as close as possible to receive the benefit. Now, as it's a core ability, you can't use the Moorpath Menaces alongside with Countercharge on the same unit, because Countercharge and Fixing on Feeding are both charge keyword abilities, so it's going to be one or the other. The ability is also going to act like a pseudo redeploy almost, if you think about it that way, where there's no command point involved, and it requires you of rolling a 3-up to potentially get into combat. However, it uniquely allows you to get that unit into combat and functions as a charge, which is then going to mean that you're triggering your Mawtribes battle trait like your Trampling Charge to start dealing some mortal damage. It will synergize nicely with things like your Tyrants, who also do mortal damage when they charge. What also makes this a really interesting interaction is because even though it's a charge move, you don't need to finish within half an inch of an enemy unit for it to be successful like a normal charge would be. So just roll that 3-up, you then get to move within 3 inches or move up to 3 inches. And if you end your move within 3 inches, you then are eligible to still pile in and fight using your combat zone and your abilities off the back of that. So again, super fascinating. Absolutely love this particular rule. The other battle formation is the Greedy Eaters, which is used once per turn at the end of any turn. Pick up to D3 friendly Ogre infantry units that were in combat with an enemy unit that was destroyed this turn to be the target. You then get to return 1 model to each target unit. So your Ogre infantry units are with an enemy unit that has been destroyed. Heroes can technically benefit, but there is no real benefit, so we'll ignore them for a second. And your units are going to be eligible even if they're still in combat, so long as they're triggered by being in combat or have been in combat and they have destroyed a unit that turn. This ability is going to provide a great way to bring back models that are usually incredibly hard to bring back through recursion methods like Rally. It does return an entire 4 health model to up to 3 different units in a turn. And unlike Rally, it doesn't check if any models have been damaged before starting to bring back models, which ultimately makes it a much easier way to gain access to recursion in Ogres. This ability will work better with the fewer units that you have, given that it's a limitation of D3 units that can be selected as the target. But it will still help smaller units by overcoming their losses. Smaller units you're less likely to use Rally on, and it's going to help provide them ultimately bringing back models, going out and skirmishing or hitting the flanks or taking the first brunt of the charge, whatever it might be. Again, keeping those ogres alive, again, only a good thing. The next thing the ogres have gained is a new set of enhancements known as Big Names. Big Names are an enhancement that can be only given to your Ogor Mawtribes heroes that stretches from your Stonehorn Frostlord all the way to your Slaughtermaster. Now, you only get one big name, and it can be freely combined with a heroic trait or an artifact on the same hero, or you can separate them across different heroes. Completely your choice. Gut Slugger adds 1 to the hit rolls for the unit's combat attacks if it did not charge in the same turn. Now, we know ogres love to charge, and they can't always be charging, unfortunately. This ability is one of the few safe ways of getting a +1 to hit bonus in the army. However, it's not going to affect your companion weapons, which is going to make it less valuable on your hero riding a monster. If the selected hero charges, uses countercharge, or uses the new Moorpath's Menace formation, they're not going to benefit from this ability in this turn. This will help solve one of the most common problems featured in the Ogor Mawtribes, and that is the momentum you start to lose after you've hit the charge and you found yourself in a struggling, grinding, prolonged fight where you just want to keep charge and do your ABCs. And this will help you a little bit because it helps you grind it out. And it also means you could be applying all-out defense on the hero while still gaining this +1 to hit bonus, obviously, when you don't charge. Mage Swallower is the second big name where you subtract 1 from ward rolls for enemy units while they're within 6 inches of this unit. Now, this is going to be really strong against many armies and then completely useless against others. It will negate a typical 6-up ward save on a death army. It will make tougher foes like your Nurgle a lot easier to handle. Since this is a passive aura of a 6-inch range, the hero doesn't even need to be in combat to affect enemy units. A hero who retreated from danger or auto-ran to keep up with their Iron Guts could still be amplifying this ability from a distance. A Frostlord on Stonehorn or any other type of melee-orientated Mawtribes hero would become much more intimidating with this enhancement. It also allows you to move away from the typical Fangs of Ghur artifact selection, which turns off ward saves for a unit once per game, and potentially use that artifact slot for another artifact available to the army, like your +1 to hit aura, for example, from the gruesome trophies. It is a passive ability, so it will work for your shooting as long as the hero is close enough to its target. Finally, we had the Mega Gobbler, where once per battle in the deployment phase, it lets you pick one of the following keywords: infantry, cavalry, monster, war machine, or beast. For the rest of the battle, each time any damage points are allocated to an enemy unit with that keyword by this unit's combat attacks, and that enemy unit is destroyed in the same turn, add 1 to the attack characteristics of this unit's melee weapons, and the effects are cumulative. This ability won't provide any inherent bonuses until the hero allocates damage points via combat attacks, and it won't trigger any damage allocated outside of combat, so for example from your shooting. You do get to choose 1 unit type each game, which is going to give you a lot of flexibility, especially for those people who go to events and you get to choose the best keyword to match your opponent. Sometimes this is going to be an easy choice, like when you play into Gargants, which are all monsters. Otherwise, you'll be picking your judgment on where you think your hero is going to start fighting into. To leverage the potential bonus, the hero must contribute to destroying the unit of that chosen type. This makes it best suited for aggressive melee heroes like anyone who rides a monster or a tyrant. It might be worth choosing a unit type that you know will be easier to kill for that hero, to then empower them to later go fight those tougher heroes. For example, you're fighting into a Slaanesh army who has a lot of infantry, but a couple of little small cavalry units as well. It might be worth choosing the cavalry because you think that it's easier to attain the bonus, and then once you've gained the bonus, go in and fight the infantry later in the turn. Now, once the bonus has been applied, the bonus attacks are unconditional, meaning that the hero will continue to reap the benefits regardless on who they're facing, not necessarily just into the keyword that they initially got the trigger from. These bonus attacks won't apply to the companion weapons, but despite all of that, the monster heroes like your Frostlord are still going to be the best recipients to get this bonus because they'll have great movement and toughness and raw output, and it allows them to receive the trigger and the benefit and access this a whole lot easier than many of your other heroes. Alternatively, if you don't want to run a big beastie, the Tyrant would also be a really good option given its profile, and you can protect it a little easier with a lot of the infantry you have available to it. There are two alternative war scrolls within the Scourge of Ghyran for ogres, the first being the Ironblaster. Now, this war scroll is optional, and you can use the existing war scroll if you prefer for the Ironblasters. Now, looking at the Scourge of Ghyran version, its base profile hasn't changed. It has lost its short-ranged hail shot profile, so you no longer have to choose the weapon profile each time you go on and shoot. It's just one flat profile of the Ironblaster cannon profile. But that profile has now gained a flat 5 damage rather than being D3 plus 3, which makes it more consistent. The Clubber melee profile is now a Rend 1, and the Rhinox profile has gained an attack, moving it from 2 attacks to 3 attacks, as well as being anti-charge, which in combination will improve its melee output. Because of all of these melee changes, I would be quite confident that a weaker unit that might deep strike or try to charge into the Ironblaster just to tie it up not only wouldn't be able to tie it up for long, but also would probably die pretty quickly because this is a solid melee profile, especially with the anti-charge. It has gained a new Shrapnel Blast ability that you can use once per turn in your shooting phase. Now, that adds 1 to the attack characteristics of its ranged weapon, as well as giving the ranged weapon a crit 2 hits. It is a once per turn army ability, so only 1 Ironblaster in each of your shooting phases would benefit, and there is no combination here with covering fire. I would definitely save a command point to use on all-out attack for this unit, especially when it's using its Shrapnel Blast with its extra shot and its ability to generate crit 2 hits. It does make the Ironblaster more valuable and more damage potential. Running an individual Ironblaster becomes a much scarier support piece for holding home objectives and will provide supporting fire into chaff units or chipping away at those enemy threat units. Now, if you were going to take more than 1 Ironblaster, it will mean that it will lose some of its value because you can only use the Shrapnel Blast once per shooting phase, your shooting phase. However, taking multiple Ironblasters is still a viable strategy. It will definitely help blast off your opponent, and it will give you more flexibility of where you apply the Shrapnel Blast on, and it's less prone to being tied up into combat, because if one gets tied into combat, you hopefully still have a second one not in combat that can blast away. The other alternative war scroll is the Noblar Scraplauncher. Now, the Scourge of Ghyran version's base profile is unchanged from the existing scroll. The melee profile has been combined, so it's lost its awful scrappers, stabbers profile, and it's gained 2 extra attacks on the Rhinox Sharp Horns profile. That's gone from 2 attacks to 4 attacks. It's also gained the anti-charge as well. This is definitely a moderate increase to the melee output of the Scraplauncher. But you're not picking this for its melee profile, you're picking it for its ranged abilities. And the range profile has been tweaked to reflect the splintered wood, the poisonous fungi, and the blood wasp nests that it's now lobbing at its enemies rather than the scraps. The range has been reduced by 6 inches. It's gone from range 24 to range 18. The attack profile has moved away from the 3d6 random attacks to be a consistent 12 attacks, which is slightly higher than the average for a 3d6 roll. It used to have a 2 wound roll of a 4-up. It's now a 2-up. This is a big improvement. And it's also gained a point of rend on its profile and swapped anti-infantry and the crit auto wounds to just have crit 2 hits. This is another significant improvement to the War Scroll because you'll be more effective against other unit types beyond the infantry, and you've also gained more consistency from the flat attack profile. You, through this combination, should expect to be dealing more save rolls to your opponent because of the improved to wound roll, and you should, on average, generate 2 additional attacks via the crit 2 hits. You no longer have the crit auto wound, and it has lost the loaded up boosted version when it was in range of a Noblar unit. It also lost the Rain of Scraps debuff that debuffed an enemy unit with a 1-inch to hit penalty after it's slain a model. There was some type of rule like that. It's lost that ability, but it has still got a way to debuff your enemy. It's just through a different rule called Scrap Away. It is a once per turn army ability used in any shooting phase. Pick an enemy unit that has had any damage points allocated to it in this phase by using this unit's shooting attacks to be the target. Then roll a dice, and if the roll equal or exceeds the target's save characteristic, halve the target's movement characteristic until the start of your next turn. In addition, on a 5-up, until the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for the target to a minimum of 1. The debuff works in both shooting phases rather than just in your own, and it no longer requires a model in the target unit to be slain. Instead, to get the buff, you just need to deal some damage points to the target by its shooting attacks, and the effect is now going to last until the start of your next turn. So why I like this alternative version is that the Scraplauncher can now effectively debuff single model units like your heroes and monsters, and even elite units where having to slay a model could be quite tough with wounds of 4 or wounds of 5. Now you're just rolling a dice equal or above the target save roll, which is obviously going to be great against heroes with a high armor save because obviously a saber 3 or 4, great, perfect targets. That's exactly who you want to be shooting at. You don't want to be shooting at, 1 health idiots. Now, halving the movement can be helpful when you know your opponent is about to take the next turn. And on a 5-up, you could even be more punishing by reducing the charge roll by 1 dice. This is a once per turn army ability, which means that multiple scrap launchers in the same list will have less value, and it will only work against 1 enemy unit. So you can't go out, split the attacks, and try to trigger this multiple times in the same phase. Overall, I think there are some good updates here between the new battle formations, the big new name enhancements, as well as the 2 alternative war scrolls. I know BCR players, you're a little bit sadder. You didn't get as much. It was definitely infantry focus. At least you got some big names. Both battle formations are interesting enough that it might incentivize you to tweak some of your lists, especially if you are that Gutbuster style ogre player. Your Iron Guts coming back through Greedy Eaters is a horrifying prospect, and the Moorpath Menaces is going to bring some really interesting movement shenanigans to the game. The big names is definitely the winner in my opinion because it's free. It's completely free. It doesn't require you to remove anything from your list. It can go on the Beastclaw Raiders side. It can go on the Gutbuster side. It has no restriction really other than Kragnos and maybe, is there a Noblar hero? Not yet. Hopefully one day we'll get the 3 Noblars in a trench coat. But basically, most, if not all of your army can take advantage of that, which is great. The Mega Gobbler on a Frostlord on Stonehorn is going to cause some absolute mayhem on the battlefield. And the new War Scrolls are interesting enough to reconsider. I don't think I've seen a Scraplauncher in the game since 2nd edition. I don't think I've seen it in 3rd edition. I definitely haven't seen it in 4th. And while the correct answer is always just to add more ogres to a list, I do think adding one of these 2 war machines isn't a bad idea. The Ironblaster and the Scraplauncher are both interesting pieces, and their shooting abilities are going to bring some interesting play to the battlefield, and I would recommend you give them a shot. And if you're like me and you enjoy theory crafting and list building and trying to work out all the synergies, why not come over to the AOS Coach Discord server where we have plenty of spaces to feast on all of these delicious rules, like for the ogres, like all the other factions. The link is down below in the episode description, and I hope you come and join me at the table of Discord. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.